Today I've chosen to give a persuasive speech over corporal punishment. Here's my audience. Spanking is not effective for disciplining a child. According to dictionary.com, spanking falls under the category of corporal punishment. And the definition for corporal punishment is a punishment of physical nature, such as caning, flogging, or beating. Is this how parents really want their children to remember their childhood? Either getting beat for not taking out the trash, or for crying in the grocery store because they're hungry, or just for not cleaning their room. Also, according to dictionary.com, the definition for spanking is to strike a person, usually a child, with an open hand, a slipper, etc., especially on the buttocks, as in punishment. How many parents actually strike their children with an open hand, if a hand at all? Spanking is not the effective or even positive approach to disciplining a child. Most parents who do support the spanking issue that I know usually use one or all of these next few arguments. One being that they say, I got spanked when I was a child. 2, that the Bible says, spare the rod and spoil the child. Or 3, that spanking is the only thing that gets my child's attention and makes them stop doing what they're doing. When a parent who uses the excuse for spanking their child by saying that they got spanked as a child, they should just really reevaluate their reason and ask themselves what it did for them in the long run. Most parents would say that all they remember about their childhood is having to go out to the barn or somewhere where they got spanked, and then the agonizing pain that they endured after being beat by a belt, a paddle, or some other form of a beating object. Most parents' spanking comes from their own temper crisis about what their child has just done in order to cause that anger and frustration. Most people usually spank their child when they are angry, and that can sometimes and usually leads to unnecessary spanking. Most people say that spare the rod and spoil the child is saying that the child will only prosper if they are punished physically for doing something wrong. I think that people usually take this quote completely out of context, and that when I think of the word spare, I usually think that it means don't use it. Like, for example, I would say, spare me if I'm speaking to someone and I just don't want to hear what they're talking about, because I don't want to hear it. So, spare me, don't tell me. By definition, though, from dictionary.com, spare means to refrain from harming or punishing, or to do without. So, to take another look at the quote, spare the rod and spoil the child, I would say that it means do not use the rod, but instead spoil the child. And lastly, when someone says spanking is the only thing that gets my child's attention and makes them stop doing the wrong behavior, I can't help but think that this is the worst excuse a parent can make. Yes, of course, it definitely catches the child's attention, because rather than trying to teach the child the correct way to do something or to not to do something, the parent is actually distracting them from learning how to resolve the conflict in a more effective way. There are plenty of other ways around spanking that will get a child's attention. For example, a more mature way to handle things would be to put the child in timeout or make them go to their room, depending on their age. This gives the child and also the parent time to cool down, and it gives the parent time to think about logical consequences instead of taking that outrageous anger and frustration out on the child. After a certain amount of time, then it would be best to explain the harm or consequence that could happen for their actions, and just let the child know that it is only to help them or save them from a harmful situation that they are about to be in. So in conclusion, if you're a spanker and you spank your child, or if not, and you know someone who does, I just want you to think about a few things the next time it comes down to spanking or to not to spank. What does a child learn by being hit? When an adult spanks a child, this tells the child that balance is acceptable and that if you're mad, it is okay to react by hitting. Children that get hit for antisocial behaviors are more likely to just increase those behaviors. Also, another thing to think about is all kids go to school, of course, and every year parents sign the school handbook saying that it is okay for teachers or education professions to spank their children if needed. Something to keep in mind, though, is that there are only 2 paid professions that have the legal authorization to spank, and that being prostitution and school teachers. So do we really want the school teachers that are teaching your children to fall into that category? Effective discipline does exist. It just takes more time and more effort to find different methods other than spanking to solve a discipline problem. It shouldn't hurt to be a child.